This is one cruise review I hate to post because I feel like I'm betraying an old friend. My friends, I think you're going to be able to relate as I cautiously word this review of my very beloved Symphony of the Seas. If you're a subscriber, and thank you so much for subscribing, by the way, I'm almost at 10,000 subscribers, which has been my goal this past year, and I'm absolutely delighted and grateful to you. But if you are a subscriber, you have probably caught on to the fact that I have a very special place in my heart for all Royal Caribbean Oasis-class ships. And so saying anything negative about the Symphony of the Seas feels like I'm talking behind the back of a trusted friend, which, for the record, is just not my style. But like all cruises, like all vacations actually, none are going to be absolutely perfect. So my first instinct was just to ignore the things that went wrong during the cruise. But because of the way Royal Caribbean handled the problems, I think there is something that many cruisers, especially newer cruisers, can learn from it. Agree or disagree, I hope you'll comment below because I always value your input. This time we were sailing out of Cape Liberty, New Jersey, which is one of my favorite departure ports. For me, Cape Liberty is so much easier to access than sailing out of the nearby Manhattan cruise terminal because I don't have to deal with Manhattan traffic. We were spending 7 nights on board, sailing to Port Canaveral, Perfect Day at Coco Cay, and Nassau. One of the best parts of this cruise is that we weren't doing it in the dead of winter this time, which is why you get to see all this lovely footage taken in the sunshine. And that's my first warning to you. When sailing out of U.S. departure ports other than Florida, Texas, or Southern California in winter, you might be stuck in some really nasty weather for the first 1 or 2 days, and the last 1 or 2 days because, well, it's winter and it's cold. So I was very excited this time to enjoy sunshine for the bulk of our cruise. One of the things I love about cruising is that for all the things I look forward to, it's the surprises that really make my vacation special. And on this cruise, that surprise was being able to see a rocket launch when our ship was docked in Port Canaveral. It really is quite a sight to see. So if your cruise is headed to Port Canaveral, check online to see if there are any launches planned. Also, there's a huge digital sign that alerts incoming cruise ships of whether there is a launch scheduled that day, so look out for it. As I recall, it will be viewable from the starboard side of the ship as you approach the port, but if I'm wrong in that, please correct me in the comments below. So since there was a launch scheduled for our day in Port Canaveral, we stayed on board the ship and watched from the pool deck. Getting lucky with rocket launches has happened multiple times for us, but this time was a little different because the captain actually announced that there was going to be a rocket launch just about 3 minutes before it actually launched. This caused chaos as everyone from the lower decks rushed up the stairs and crushed into the elevators trying to make it to the top deck in time to see it. The behavior of people was, quite frankly, abominable and dangerous. It was like someone yelled fire in a crowded theater. Just really the worst of humanity was on display in those moments. I've been on other ships when there were rocket launches in which the captain didn't make a last-minute announcement like that, and to be honest, I always wondered why they didn't spread the word. Now I know why. And I have to say, now I think that not announcing this last minute is the smarter approach. But despite this, seeing that rocket launch and hearing it actually, because the way sound travels during a rocket launch is amazing. It was really something great to watch. And after a margarita by the pool, I pretty much forgot about how that launch brought out traits in humans that I generally don't like to see. As for the ship itself, I know some other YouTubers have complained that they feel like they forget that they're on a ship when they're on an Oasis-class ship like the Symphony. But for me anyway, I very rarely forgot that I was on a ship on the Symphony because I spent so much time on their beautiful spacious pool deck and walking around their jogging track. I understand what they're talking about though, especially if you spend a lot of time in the Royal Promenade. But even that area of the ship was so huge and wide and welcoming compared to the Royal Promenade on the Quantum-class ships that I genuinely enjoy hanging out there even if it does have a mall-like atmosphere. Another thing I really appreciated about this ship is how well the passengers are spread out throughout the ship. Well, except during that moment when the captain had everyone racing up to the pool deck to see the launch. And that's largely because the major attractions are so spread out. While on other ships, people usually are crowded on the pool decks, on the Symphony of the Seas, people are spread out in the Royal Promenade on deck 5, the boardwalk area with the carousel on deck 6, the solarium on deck 15, which is actually my favorite solarium of all the Royal Caribbean Caribbean ships I've been on. The casino, theater, and ice rink are on deck 4, and the flow rider and zip line are up on deck 16. So with so much to do and with it all spread out among so many different decks, I generally didn't feel like this ship was crowded, even though I have a feeling we were pretty close to full capacity. One thing I'll definitely skip when I next go on the Symphony of the Seas will be Wonderland. For as much as people talk about it, I truly disliked the food there. And while I loved eating sushi at Izumi on this ship, and I'm a sushi snob, so that's saying something, I will skip the hibachi experience next door to it. But it is a great show and good food, so do it at least once, and you may turn into one of those people who never skips it. For me, while I love making new friends and meeting people, I'm just introverted enough to not want to sit for a lengthy meal with people I don't know on a regular basis. Am I alone in this among cruisers? You tell me. Highlights of this ship for me are the Abyss dry slide, which I really enjoy because I get the same kind of low-key thrill that I usually get on the Perfect Storm water slides, but I don't have to get wet, and the line is usually much, much shorter. Another thing you really don't want to miss that no one seems to tell you on YouTube is the comedy club called The Attic. The comedians in there were so good. It's hard to get reservations because it's a small venue, but every time we showed up for standby, we got in. So don't forget about that standby option. And also, I love the show in the Aqua Theater on this ship. It's absolutely spectacular. Really, all of the entertainment on board this ship was extraordinary. Don't miss any of the shows, please. Not even Flight, which I thought was going to be a letdown, but wow, the sets and the effects in the show blew my mind. And for that one, try to get a seat toward the front and in the middle. You'll thank me later. I also loved Central Park, though I will warn you to be careful walking in Central Park in the morning because the condensation on the ground makes the pathways very slick. Yes, that's another thing that YouTubers don't tell you, but I'm a mom, so I'm going to. The ship's designers did an incredible job making you feel like you are truly in a park setting with little pathways that wind along and then open up to restaurants, outdoor seating, and even an area where they have live music that proved to be my favorite entertainment on the ship. In fact, my favorite night of the entire cruise was eating dinner outdoors at Jamie's Italian and listening to someone play the guitar. It was one of those moments when I just felt myself decompress completely. I wish I could literally give everyone in the world just one night like that, because I feel like we'd all just get along better. And I should also give a special shout out to Jamie's Italian because it was a delicious meal. I know that some people say that they prefer Royal Caribbean's other Italian option on other ships, which is Giovanni's. But I have to say that Jamie's Italian, specifically when I'm eating outdoors in Central Park, is so much better than any Giovanni's I've been in. And I love Giovanni's. So I think a lot of that has to do with the park-like setting at Jamie's on this ship and live music that doesn't shatter your eardrums when you're eating. It also might be, drumroll please, because I was eating at Jamie's Italian for free. That's right, completely, absolutely free. Not part of a dining package either, just plain old free, and that, oddly enough, brings me to the bad parts of my cruise. And none of them are catastrophic at all, let me be very clear. But I hope that by sharing them, others might learn a little bit about how something a little bad can turn into something very, very good when people handle it the right way. So like any cruise, there were, of course, some things that went wrong. And many people on this channel have made comments on my videos saying things like, "I hope you complained." And in truth, I actually am usually quite cautious about complaining, because if it has anything to do with the crew, I always remember how hard they work and how everyone makes mistakes. But unfortunately, Royal Caribbean can be harsh on the crew when they find out from a passenger that a mistake has been made. But on this particular cruise, there were two things that happened that I couldn't avoid complaining about. First off, the noise in my cabin those first couple nights was terrible. I kept hearing this banging sound. Even when I put on my noise cancellation headphones, I could still hear it. Of course, my husband slept through it all, but that's what 20 years in the Army does. After that second night, I went out on my balcony and figured out that the noise was coming from the barrier between our balcony and the neighbor's balcony. On some Royal Caribbean balconies, that barrier between the balconies can be opened up like a door, allowing people to share their balconies in case you happen to know the people in the next cabin over. It does seem odd that they have that, since our cabin was not an adjoining cabin. But, well, there you are. Apparently, that barrier should have been unlocked for us by the person who cleaned our cabin before we boarded, but it wasn't. And so when the wind blew, it rattled crazily. So once I figured that out, I definitely needed them to lock that for us. Outside of the rattling noise, I didn't like the idea that someone I didn't know could walk onto our balcony. But since we kept missing our cabin steward, I ended up having to go down to guest services and ask them to send someone up to lock it. Problem solved, and they were so apologetic. Then on that same day, when I got a salad from the park cafe, I discovered a very disturbing decapitated bee in my salad. Now, I've had bugs in my salad before. In fact, I have extraordinarily bad luck when it comes to finding things in my food at restaurants. So a decapitated bee isn't exactly going to send me into fits. But I did want to alert them because, well, how do I say this? The bee was in chunks, and I wasn't sure if all of its body parts were accounted for in my salad. And I didn't want someone who was allergic to bees to eat bee parts because I imagine that would be very bad for them. Though I'm not a doctor, so who really knows? So I very quietly pointed it out to the crew. They were horrified and embarrassed, and I assured them it's okay. And that was that. No big deal. So we were surprised when we received a letter of apology for the issues we faced during our cruise, and were told that we would get a free meal at Jamie's Italian, as well as a future cruise credit valued at 20% of what we paid for our cruise. That was kind of a shocker, honestly, and really is an example of how when you complain the right way, not yelling, not drawing attention to yourself, not threatening legal action, nor trying to publicly shame crew members, all of which, let's face it, I've seen plenty of on cruise ships. If you are kind and respectful when you complain, Royal Caribbean really does go the extra mile to make it up to you. So that, my friends, is why I wanted to share with you what did go wrong on this cruise, because it really says a lot about how committed Royal Caribbean is to ensuring you have a good vacation. Overall, just like always, I give this ship and its crew, its food and entertainment, very high marks, and am already looking forward to another cruise on an Oasis-class ship in the future. How about you? Have you found Royal Caribbean to be committed in making things right when they go wrong? I hope you'll post your comments below because we can all learn from each other when it comes to cruise experiences. As always, thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, for commenting, and for making this channel such a positive, supportive community. I'm so grateful for you.